Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogues. It is my pleasure to shift the focus this week to something that's very exciting, and that's the whole question of Aliyah, and in particular, Aliyah from North America. And the best way to do it nowadays is to speak to someone from Nefesh B'Nefesh. Nefesh B'Nefesh has been around for almost 2 decades, and it has transformed the entire process of people making Aliyah to Israel. It was founded by Rabbi Josh Fass out of Florida at the time, together with Tony Gelbart. But the reality of it is that today it's very mainstream, part of the normal process that people participate in, and has helped so many people. Everybody I know keeps on going to Nefesh B'Nefesh, opening up their Tik Aliyah and working with Nefesh B'Nefesh to make their time getting ready to make Aliyah possible. We are joined today by Marc Rosenberg, who is the Vice President of Diaspora Partnerships, which means a lot of things, but really is nice because it's good to have a partner on the other side of the ocean. So thank you so very much, Marc, for joining me today.
It's an honor and pleasure to be here, everyone.
Great. Let me just start with a real simple question. My perception is that from the modern Orthodox, the Orthodox community, that since COVID hit, Aliyah is up. Is this real?
Objectively speaking, yes. Statistically speaking, yes. The Aliyah is up 30% compared to pre-COVID years. I don't want to compare it to 2021. But we are seeing a spike. 30% increase is indeed a higher rate. So yes, to answer your question.
And how many people is that 30%?
So the total Aliyah for 2021 that came in is 4,477, I believe, to be precise, almost 4,500 North Americans. That includes about 600, maybe 550 Canadians. So we're talking about almost 1,000 more North Americans this past year than in pre-COVID times. I want to also say it's interesting whether you think that number is a lot or a little. We obviously think 1,000 more people is a great increase, but we have to understand the perspective of this is also a little bit of a paradox. And Israel Prize-winning professor Shlomo Avineri says that there's a historical paradox. When Jews couldn't make Aliyah, they very much wanted to make Aliyah. And then when they finally could, they didn't. And so on mass level, he's speaking about. And then he points out that the second level of the paradox is that when life was horrible in Europe and other countries in the Middle East, Jews weren't necessarily moving to Israel. But when life became pleasant in the West, suddenly you saw mass immigration to Israel. So for us to see that North American Jews were coming at a rate pre-Nefesh to Nefesh, about 1,200 each year from North America, to see it go up over the past 20 years to 3,000, 3,500, and then just in the past year to 4,500 is a very exciting development.
Well, the pattern of Jews not making Aliyah goes back to Ezra and Nehemiah, where the vast majority of the Jews chose to stay in Babylonia and not to come to Eretz Yisrael when they had the opportunity. But what I find fascinating is the correlation with COVID. Is it because people are able to work remotely, or it's just Nim Aslam, they had enough, and COVID was what put them over the edge?
So we have done our best to make this, my response not to be anecdotal. We actually, in speaking to many people, and more important, the essays that people are writing, the disruption that the COVID pandemic is causing, I think that we're still feeling the after effects and the changes for a few more years to come, I think has led to a recalibration for many people of the factors that cause them to hold down. And one of the biggest for many people has been their career, and they felt as if they've invested professionally or they enjoy their career very much. And the idea of leaving it would be too much for them to change their life, even despite their strong desire to live in Eretz Yisrael. And suddenly it became different. The calculation was different, or I'll say it differently. If we met someone 4 years ago in one of your visits to Israel, and they say, "Oh, I work American hours, I work for an American company," we thought it was interesting, but it was a little bit weird. Okay, they made the choice, and now it's just mainstream. So that has been a significant factor for many people with the rise of COVID. Has been the normative possibilities to work remotely. But the overall common factor for many people has been just a recalibration of their time spent and where they want to be, not just the work-life balance, but on the career side, but how to have a better balance about where they want to work and live.
And the majority of Aliyah, is it coming from a specific segment of American Jews or North American Jews?
So to share some statistics, it's interesting that the rise in Aliyah that I mentioned is 30% is actually across the normal the ages as well as demographics. So in a typical year, we actually have, not typical, it used to be about 1,300 singles under the age of 30 making Aliyah. And that's already up to 1,600 and 1,700 now. We're anticipating even a higher spike in that. And it's interesting, of those singles under the age of 30, about 65% of them self-define themselves as anything but Orthodox. Whereas on the families that are coming, anywhere between 25 to 55, about 68% of them define themselves in some sort of category of Orthodox, whether you want to put it something in the hyphenated. So we see that there is a strong growth amongst retirees, families, and singles because during the pandemic. But it has been across the board, not just one specific population.
And how much does the rising cost of day school and college education play as a factor in people making Aliyah?
So let me tie this to your previous question. I think that this has been one of the interesting results of the pandemic. I think that I felt this a lot, especially in those first 4 months when we weren't driving our car around and wondering, we just saved a lot of money on gas. There's been time for people to look at their budgets and their expenditures, and especially those students who were going to school online for universities that usually charge $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 a year. There causes reflection to look at that, and that has been a factor. Especially if you make Aliyah, you're eligible for almost free college degree. But even if you're coming to Israel, that has been a factor. And there's a lot of talk about the tuition crisis, and I appreciate that, Rabbi Manteki. When people talk about the tuition crisis, it's not just day school; it also affects what people are thinking about spending, whether they're thinking about going to a place like Yeshiva University or another of the Ivy Leagues as well. So that has caused people to think about the investment that they're going to have, the bang for their buck of saying, "Wow, I can send them to Israel and be on obviously a kosher campus and be around lots of young people in their age and factor in flights back and forth." We're seeing that as an ongoing trend that has been accelerated by COVID. But it really is still up to the individual family to run that calculation. But it has been, for many, many people, that cross section of the detail of seeing where the rubber meets the road of, okay, if my budget is this, it's a little bit of a misnomer to say that tuition in Israel is free. And therefore, my son, who's in 11th grade, we spend about maybe $500 a month on his yeshiva tuition. So it isn't free, but it does factor into our overall expenses, and that's obviously less than many of the schools in your neighborhood. So it is an increasing factor, but it really comes together to an overall picture of the quality of life that they want to have, and is their potential earning power going to deliver that?
Now, real estate prices are through the roof, as I understand it, in major centers. Yerushalayim, I'm told it's impossible for a person to be able to purchase unless if they come with a lot of resources, which is another way of saying money. Where do most of the families end up?
So let me qualify your comment. It was actually correct. So and it's a misnomer that some people make when they say, "Oh, I hear prices in Yerushalayim are expensive." That's like me saying, "Oh, Chicago prices are expensive." I'm sure you could point out to me on a map a neighborhood in Chicago where I could find really affordable housing. Okay, there may not be a strong shul that's nearby, and there are neighborhoods in Jerusalem where there aren't English speakers. English speakers are one of the factors that drive up these prices. So if you do want to live in the German colony or Rehavia or in Baca, the prices will be higher. And there are neighborhoods that are more affordable, but they aren't as close to those centers. So there's an expansion going on, and people are pushing out the periphery. Whereas 15 years ago, it's about 15 years ago, the mayor of Modi'in used to come to Nefesh B'Nefesh events to try and encourage English speakers to move there. He doesn't have to come anymore because now Buchman are in Modi'in, that in Givatzi, and it's expanding to much more Israeli neighborhoods where they're moving, and there's this constant search for something that is the new horizon, and people are finding those places. It's a question about whether you want to be the earlier adapter, whether you and I just was speaking to someone today about what was a front like when Rabbi Riskin first moved there, and the prices were quite inexpensive then. Now that 30,000 people that are living there, the prices are a different pace. So there are people who are constantly looking for those places, but the hot centers like in Beit Shemesh, Yerushalayim, and Ra'anana are attracting people, but they are slowly expanding out to other neighborhoods nearby.
So what is the hot place to go to that people are choosing instead of the well-known centers? What's the next Efrat or the next Modi'in or the next Beit Shemesh?
So one of them, so I feel bad. I'll give you the secrets for it, but it's they are picking up very, very fast. One outside of Yerushalayim is Givat Zev, and the prices are already going there, but it's not officially part of the city. It's popping out right out there. Karmei Gat, I know that you have some family that might be living there as well, and so that is moving to some area, and people like. It was first more famous because Intel was nearby, but it's really opening up those type of spaces that aren't so familiar now, but in 5 years from now, it's gonna have a scent of that energy from Modi'in as well. And there are some smaller places, like places like Zichron Yaakov are becoming much more stronger hangouts. And I was just visiting some new Olim in Ra'anana, and they are pushing to some nearby neighborhoods that are slowly outside there. And Israelis are living there, but there's that less comfort that when you know that you're sending your kid to the school, and there's going to be some other English speakers. So I think that's part of it. And there's some smaller places that are picking that up. But the strong emphasis for many people is if they can stay closer to the networks in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, Beit Shemesh, Ra'anana, then they could always fall back on a high school that's going to be able to serve their American or Canadian interests. They might not have a hockey team, but at least they'll have a lot of the skills to help them integrate.
So that's actually one of the issues that I heard recently, that once upon a time, the thought was that if your children were at a certain age, upper middle school, high school, and you made Aliyah, that the odds are that they were going to end up back in the States, that there really wasn't the kind of schooling, the opportunities for them. There was a point where they opened up a special yeshiva for Americans who had generally failed in the Israeli system because of that kind of confluence of pressures. Is that still the case? Is it still the toughest age, or has that changed?
So it's a challenge. It's a great question. First of all, when everyone makes Aliyah, they're eligible for a subsidized flight from the government, free flight. And I tell people you get to bring not only 2 pieces of luggage with you, but you also bring your baggage. And therefore, you have to think about every child and where they are. Dr. Phil from television says you're only as happy as your most unhappy child, which is the advice I share with every family I sit with. And therefore, you have to consider if your child is in 1st grade and 5th grade, but the older the child is, it's a big factor. I'm excited to say, I think it is really impressive to see the maturity of the Israeli school system. So I feel bad because I was blaming some of the parents, but the school system has gotten better at receiving these children and helping with them. So we have seen, especially in the past year and a half, a rise of teenagers coming on Aliyah. We give strong caution and conversations with each family to make sure that they're aware of what's going on. And families are making it work, but it takes a lot of honesty about what's going to happen. Israel has a different measure of success. What do I mean by that? Is that I felt growing up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, that where you were going to university, especially when you're 17, 18, was a measure of success socially. That was the conversation at the Kiddush, at the shul afterwards. In Israel, people aren't worrying about what university you're going. Are you going to volunteer in the army? Are you going to do shut lumi? Are you going to get a job? There's less pressure for that to make those choices. And some teenagers find that as a relief. Other people find it panic-inducing that they're going to have to sign up and commit to doing shut lumi or the army. So there are advantages and disadvantages. But I can say that in our experience, and so far Nefesh B'Nefesh has helped 70,000 North Americans make Aliyah, that our best practices are shared with families, and therefore people are coming with the knowledge of, okay, if they have their GED or if they're not going to enjoy the school, what are they going to do? And that's making it for a better experience for the family all around.
So from your perspective, and I know obviously you're coming from Nefesh B'Nefesh and you're one of the cheerleaders of Aliyah, what's a reason for someone not to come on Aliyah?
Oh, it's a great question. Well, first, I want to say that I think you mentioned the founding of Nefesh B'Nefesh in Boca Raton, Florida, with Rabbi Josh Fass and Tony Gelbart, our head of the board. I think when they sat together in Boca Raton, Florida, what was really the crux of the idea, which I think is the revolution that has set forth not just Aliyah from North America, but the way that the government and the Jewish agency think about Aliyah, is this notion of Aliyah of choice. Is that Jews are not running away from the terrible, they might be running away from the terrible weather in Chicago, but it's a beautiful community, beautiful people, it's the passion. And I know that especially Chicago is one of these cities where they know that the children have a gravitational pull to come back after their studies as well. And when you treat Israel as a place of options, it becomes much more of a competitive choice instead of guilt and trying to make people feel bad. And that has always been Nefesh B'Nefesh's approach, to make sure that they understand if this is a choice that they are doing. Now, I think the hardest part, and this is a question I sometimes get, is what's the hardest part about living in Israel? It's definitely being far away from family. And it's really difficult. So some people's family situation is causing them to say, listen, I can't come now, and my heart is in Israel. For other people, they feel fulfilled what they're doing professionally, and it gives them that energy to go. And therefore, for some of them, retirement is the place they want to be in Israel, and they're raising their children to live in Israel. I think that's part of it as well. And other people, and this is also, I think, the third one is that you're not going to have. I can't find a neighborhood that's going to be exactly like West Rogers Park here in Jerusalem, or you can't just have the exact same feeling, even if it seems the same because I'm using the same cell phone. I can speak English at the restaurants. There is an element that this is in the Middle East, and the language is Hebrew. So people have to have that degree of comfort that they are going to be a part of this big, messy balagan, which is the country of Israel. And I think those are the biggest obstacles for people. But I think that this is controversial. It sounds controversial, but I actually don't think that people make Aliyah for ideological reasons. I think that people make Aliyah for very practical reasons. What do I mean by that? I think that you and I'm confident saying this, that you and I have a very similar ideology about the state of Israel, about the Jewish people, and Ahavat Yisrael and stuff like that. But I was ready at the stage of my life when I was 25 to, pack up into 2 bags and move to Israel and start a different career. And when people see the move to Israel as, oh, I have to be like Avraham Avinu, I have to be a leader, I have to be crossing the boundaries, I have to be like such a super knowledgeable person, a brave person that way. And many people see our Aliyah flights that way. They see the people, wow, those are heroes doing that. When I rather say, I think that they are making a heroic decision. And you have to be ready. You have to weigh those decisions and weigh the situation that every person is in.
So it's interesting you talk about ideology versus practicality, because it's true, especially with the younger adults. Once you enter into the millennials, you find that there's a lot of transactional relationships, that it's not the sense of community or the same sense of ideology that it once had been. And I guess it's interesting that you said that the numbers of singles has grown and that the number of singles from the non-Orthodox community seems to be the majority. What's drawing them? If it's not ideology, then what's drawing them to Israel?
So I want to say I'll make a sandwich. I think it's not just ideology. Okay, I'll come back to that in a moment. I think the rise in non-Orthodox Aliyah for singles is actually very similar to the Orthodox singles that are coming, in that they're searching for meaning, and Israel is a place where they are finding that vibe, that energy of meaning much more. Therefore, someone said something very profound to me, a mentor of mine, Esther Bronwich. She says that young people see their identity similar to the browsers open up on their screen. So I actually have 6 things open right now, which is actually pretty good for me. And sometimes they look at ESPN, and sometimes they might go to YU Torah, and sometimes they might check their Gmail, and they switch from identity to identity, but they're all there for them. So I don't think that the young people are less ideological. For many of the non-Orthodox that are coming to Israel solves their identity crisis, because they don't have to answer this question when they're put on the spot of what does it mean, how do they want to express their Judaism? Because often in the United States, to do that, you need to go to a synagogue or a JCC. Here in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem, you can just buy challah wherever you go. You can express that, they can live Jewishly and have that without the complexities of just the definition of religion or just the shuls, and if you're not Orthodox, the shuls might not be as big or having people your age in it. So when they come to Israel and they see that it's a thriving place professionally, the startup nation, and they can also do that. And I think it's really powerful when you think about the rise of Masa programs or gap year programs. And it's no surprise that currently there are almost over 4,000 North Americans on an 18-year-old gap year program in Israel, that some of them would say, I want to stay, or I want to come back after college as well.
By the way, one of the things that I've started to say, at least in my school and other settings, I don't call it a gap year anymore, because a gap year means a vacation. We call them a growth year nowadays. But to go back to going back to this idea that you're talking about, is there any statistic of a correlation between participants in Taglit and Birthright and Aliyah afterwards? Does that help, or is that more American focused?
So another great question. So we are doing our best to track a correlation. The funders and founders of Birthright founded it so that people will be infused with Jewish identity and live a more meaningful life out. They were not intending for people to make Aliyah. We have seen about a third of singles that are coming have been Birthright alumni. They don't come right after the Birthright. They are usually coming on a Masa experience afterwards. So that has been a path that has definitely been a feeder for us. But I think it's fascinating to think that despite Birthright bringing over, I think it's almost 500,000 North American Jews to Israel, a majority of American Jews still have never visited Israel one time.
Is that a causal relationship? But to go back to the Taglit, to the Birthright, is that a causal relationship that you can say they went on Birthright, they then went on Masa, and then they came on Aliyah, or is it just the ones who would even think about Israel have probably also gone on Birthright?
So my anecdotal response that there's a causality to it. I can tell you just from the people some of them are my colleagues. One I'm thinking of specifically, she got married and they decided to come to Israel to study for a little bit. They were not making Aliyah, but they just came for a little bit and then they end up staying. So that experience, that Birthright opened their eyes that were going to come, and then they chose to study or volunteer in Israel on a Masa program, I think is a part of that change. You can't point to a specific Birthright bus or a visit to Masada or that conversation. There are too many factors educationally to go into it. But I think it was incredible. It was a great idea 2 decades ago that's re-sparked a calibration to people to connect to Israel that has I think we are feeling those results. People are searching for that new idea right now, but Birthright really pushed a lot more people in that direction.
Now, when Nefesh B'Nefesh was started, and even to this day, leadership of Nefesh B'Nefesh are members of the Dati Leumi, the religious Zionists, the modern Orthodox community, and now Nefesh B'Nefesh is serving all of North America. Has there been any pushback from the non-Orthodox streams, non-Orthodox people saying, hey, I don't want these kippot srugot to tell me where I'm going or what I'm doing?
So Nefesh B'Nefesh, it's a really good question. I think there's two responses to it. One is we have always worked very hard, and I really credit both Tony Gilbert and Josh Fass about this. Rabbi Fass has worked very hard to make sure that Aliyah is open to all Jews and work with the heads of each denomination to make sure that they understand that Israel is the home for everyone. And we actually are working in active partnership with the movements. And we just had a great meeting with the Ramah camping movement to make sure that they understand that this is really a big part of this overall idea, that our love of Israel, or the center of Medinat Israel, is a big part of it. And if you have, and I invite you to join us on one of our Aliyah charter flights. It's amazing to be on a flight of 300 people making Aliyah, to walk down the aisle. Everyone's facing the same direction. And you walk around and you see people from all these different backgrounds together. It's really, really beautiful. And my second comment is in my travels, which I used to do before COVID, and I would come to the community, I would often go visit a local rabbis and just to make sure that they're aware of how to write the letters, and if they have any questions, if I could speak to the congregation. And it's interesting is that my reception from the liberal communities, from Reform and Conservative schools, was always very, very warm, very proud of their congregants who have made Aliyah, and happy to celebrate Nefesh B'Nefesh for it. In fact, they would use often the language that they think that Aliyah is a mitzvah. It's really a good deed to be celebrated. And there were a few Orthodox shuls that I did visit. And then if you ask the rabbi, is it a mitzvah to make Aliyah? They would say, it depends. It's hard. It's complicated. You sometimes get a little bit of a hesitation by certain people. And I was proud to say I had never gotten that hesitation from any of the Reform or Conservative shuls that I went to.
No, I didn't even ask you, because of Nefesh B'Nefesh, how many people does Nefesh B'Nefesh feel that it had a hand in bringing to Israel? Is there a total number?
So we are just over 70,000 since the summer of 2002.
And the beginning years, you were working independent of the Jewish agencies. That 70,000 is from the beginning, even while others were coming without you.
Yes. So that's only that we were specifically. In fact, I made Aliyah without Nefesh B'Nefesh. In the beginning, in 2001, when I came, Nefesh B'Nefesh was starting. You could apply, and if you didn't come on the plane, and there's only a few plane options. Now everyone's coming to North America. We are involved in the process, whether on a specific on the planning level or just on the helping with the paperwork. It's really can say that, whereas in 2000 there was really only about 1,300, 1,400 North American Jews making Aliyah. It's amazing to see that in 2022 we're talking about almost 5,000.
And we just have another minute or so. One last question: if you're looking ahead, what's the next challenge that Nefesh B'Nefesh is grappling with to try to resolve to bring more people to Israel?
So I mentioned three real quick. The first one is licensing. We really have made great strides with the government offices to make those transfer of license easier. I know that going from state to state in the United States isn't easy, so it's not a surprise that if you're a doctor in America to become a doctor in Israel isn't easy. So we're striving to make sure that those people who have those professions can do it more efficiently. The housing question is a big one, and seeing how the government can help give more grants to people, depending on maybe certain neighborhoods, to help make housing option more affordable, and to give that boost to people who really want to plant their home in Israel. And the third one is student debt relief, is really working on a way that people who have that dream of moving to Israel, some of them because they've invested in those professions, which means they have to do a lot of debt to pay it off, and to be able to do something that's going to be able to not push off their dream of Aliyah and having them then build a family and perhaps get stuck, that they can come contribute to Israel and help with that.
Marc, I don't even know where to begin to thank you. You really have all of that information that I wanted. I find this fascinating. I am tremendously jealous of those of you who've been able to make Aliyah and been able to make a difference in Medinat Israel directly. And I wish you great success. And I thank you so very much for your time. My best to Rabbi Fass and to all of the staff at Nefesh B'Nefesh that continues to perform this great Melechet HaKodesh. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.